Imagine this. You just bought a beautiful lot in western Montana, overlooking some mountains, maybe even a lake. You bought it in advance of retiring, so you had it for a couple of years, and then you discover you can't get water. Well, I'm here to tell you that's a scary thought, right? But it's becoming a real possibility here in Montana, and more often than you'd think. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Montana Real Estate Channel. I'm Craig Cyphers with Cyphers Family Real Estate. My family's been helping folks move into and around the state of Montana since 1966, and I work with my daughter at Exempt Realty Bitterroot Valley South. And if you're buying or selling property in Montana, especially in rural or semi-rural areas like the Bitterroot Valley, there's something happening now that could turn your plans upside down. Securing water for a home or a new build in Montana is no longer a simple afterthought. As demand grows, water becomes an issue, and the groundwater stresses increase, legal interpretations change, and the stakes for new homeowners, sellers, and brokers are higher than ever. And that's why you need a seasoned local family business like Cyphers Family Real Estate to help you navigate these increasingly complex issues. In today's video, we're going to walk through what exempt wells are and what they've meant to Montana real estate. We're also going to talk about how recent court rulings, especially Upper Missouri Waterkeepers versus DNRC, have changed what qualifies as legal water source. We're going to talk about the legislative effort, Senate Bill 358, and what it tried to do and why it failed. And we're also going to talk about why many people are now receiving warning letters from the DNRC. We're going to talk about what all of this means for you as a buyer, builder, or seller in the Bitterroot Valley, or anywhere in rural Montana for that matter. And finally, a practical due diligence checklist to protect yourself and why you need experienced local professionals working for you. So let's jump on it right now. So the first thing we want to talk about is the background, exempt wells and why they've been used. Under Montana law, there's a provision commonly referred to as exempt well rule, whereby a private well can be drilled for a domestic or small agricultural use without going through the full water rights permitting process, provided it meets certain thresholds, example, limited flow, annual withdrawal, etc. Now, for decades, this exemption has enabled rural and semi-rural home building, homes on private lots outside municipal water systems. It makes it feasible for folks to build in scenic, less dense areas like the Bitterroot Valley, where public water is often unavailable. Now, in short, for many years, if you bought a rural lot and drilled a well under the exempt well rules, you could assume water supply would work, assuming limits were respected. Why exempt wells are now under pressure under what's called cumulative impacts and legal challenges. Now, the problem with many wells is that they draw from the same aquifer, especially within a subdivision or a development. The cumulative withdrawal can stress the aquifer, reduce water availability, and threaten streams, springs, and senior water right holders. Now, under Montana law, when two or more wells draw from the same source aquifer and serve the same project or development, they may be considered a combined appropriation, meaning that they must share the same small groundwater exemption limit rather than each separately qualify. In a key case, the Upper Missouri Waterkeeper versus the Department of Natural Resources, or DNRC, a four-phase subdivision called Horse Creek Hills near Canyon Ferry Reservoir had been approved by local and state agencies relying on exempt well exemptions for each phase that was phased. The court found that treating each phase as a separate appropriation was unlawful. Well, that kind of puts it into a kind of a bind because all phases must count as a single project, combined appropriation. That ruling voided the subdivision approval. Now, the court rebuked the local and state authorities, including the DNRC, for failing to properly evaluate groundwater impacts across the full project. It emphasized that exempt well exceptions may and cannot be used to determine, to undermine what would be considered sound, science-based planning and water rights protections. So this is going to get a little interesting here in a minute. Let's jump then to the fact that the result is that in Montana, the exempt well for every lot or phase model is no longer a safe assumption. Despite the fact that, understand that we're going to show you at least one basin that's got more water than they could ever use in multiple lifetimes, but that's beside the point. Let's get to number 3, the real letters that are going out and why landowners should really pay attention. Because of the court ruling, the DNRC has begun notifying subdivision lot owners statewide that their water supply, previously assumed via exempt wells, may no longer meet the legal standards if the subdivision was built in phases or draws from a shared aquifer. It's big news, folks. These letters, often titled Subdivision Water Rights Notice to Owners, warn that all phases of a subdivision must be treated as one project and all wells must share the same 10 acre-feet per year exemption, or seek a full water right permit. And in many cases, this means some lots may no longer qualify for water under the exempt well exception. So what does this mean for you? If you own or are planning to buy a lot in a subdivision, especially one developed over phases, there's a real risk the lot may no longer have legal permitted water supply under the old rules. And if there's no permit, the well might not be legally approved long-term for your water right. Well, that's not a theory, it's happening right now. So now let's take a look at this. Number 4 here is the legislative response to all of this. And that was Senate Bill 358. And we're going to talk about that and why it failed. Now, given the confusion, the stress on aquifers, and the growing conflict between development and water right holders, the state legislature took up a bill in 2025 called SB 358 to revise exempt water laws. Now, what SB 358 would have done, according to the proponents, was aimed to divide the state into zones, closure areas, monitor areas, and other areas so that groundwater regulation could vary based on aquifer stress and growth pressure rather than using one-size-fits-all model. For areas not under the land division, the status quo for exempt wells essentially would have remained, though with codified criteria and transparency. And for areas where land is divided, i.e. subdivided, the bill sought to trigger special scrutiny and regulation. And the goal was to give regulators a way to assess aquifer health, development pressure, cumulative impacts, and especially in fast-growing or sensitive zones. And so in theory, this would balance the need for housing and growth with protection of water resources, which really seems pretty reasonable to me. But what happened and why didn't it pass? Well, while SB 358 passed out of the Senate Natural Resources Committee as amended, it failed the full second reading on April 2nd, 2025. It was a 14-36, and the critics of the bill, including some developers, housing advocates, and rural housing proponents, argued that stricter or uncertain water access rules would stifle development and worsen Montana's housing shortage. Well, entirely possible. Others argued that the bill, even as written, didn't adequately address the root problem, cumulative aquifer stress and the combined appropriation loophole, and could incentivize more sprawling development in green zone areas, shifting pressure elsewhere. As a result, despite years of work by stakeholders, regulatory review, and compromise efforts, SB 358 died in the 2025 session. But for now, the underlying legal and regulatory elements are really kind of uncertain. But understand that in all of this work over a period of years, not once did they ever invite the state's head hydrologist to be involved in this process. So much for the science of it. So number 5, what it all means right now for homeowners, sellers, and developers, especially in the Bitterroot Valley. Water access is no longer guaranteed. If you buy or own rural lot, subdivision lot, especially one developed in phases, there's no certainty the exempt well exception will hold up. The lot may not legally qualify for water under the old rules, despite the fact that you got 600 billion gallons of water in the first 600 feet, according to the state's head hydrologist. Now, new bills may require full water right permits. That means hydrological studies, permit applications, possible mitigation, and no guarantee of approval, adding time, cost, and complexity. You also have the due diligence. It's more critical than ever. As a buyer or broker, you need to request well logs, aquifer source data, proof of groundwater certificate, permit, subdivision plat history, confirm the aquifer. It gets ridiculous given the fact that you've got an unbelievable amount of water that is actually replenished every year. All that it's used by humans, animals, and agriculture gets recharged every year in the aquifer in the Bitterroot Valley, and they wanted to close it up and stop us from drilling wells. Well, anyway, so your buyer and seller expectations are going to have to shift. You need to have experienced local professionals that kind of understand water law in Montana. It's complex, technical, and highly localized for sure. It's different in the Bitterroot Valley than it is over in East Helena. You know, one small mistake or oversight could cost a buyer thousands or perhaps even kill a deal. And so at Cypher's Family Real Estate, that's precisely why we offer local experience and expertise, decades of experience in our marketplace, and a commitment to helping our clients make safe, informed decisions about land and water. So the number 6 thing here is due diligence checklist for buyers, sellers, and even brokers. If you're considering buying or selling or building a rural property in Montana, especially in a lot subdivision, run through this checklist. You want to run through it here. First of all, request documentation of water rights. That's obvious, but you'd be surprised some agents don't. You know, not just a drilled well, but a certificate of groundwater right or valid permit, including the well log, the aquifer, if it's important, the pump rate, the well depth, the date it was drilled, groundwater certificate, water rights documentation. There's an abstract there. And remember, just because there's a well doesn't mean there's a right, because sometimes people haven't filed on them. Second, you want to determine if the property is in a subdivided phase or part of a multi-phase development. If so, ask whether the subdivision was treated as a combined appropriation, and ask whether other wells in the subdivision draw from the same aquifer. Number 3, review aquifer stress and history. Now, there are other wells nearby. Perhaps you can see whether they've had stress on them or they've gone dry. Some of our areas in the Bitterroot Valley, in the 3 Mile, when they put in the gravity flow sprinkler irrigation, it was much more efficient. And some of those shallow wells, some of them much less than 100 feet in depth, they did go dry. But for the most part, the greater aquifer of the Bitterroot Valley is massive and will provide more water than we could ever possibly use. So it's really important to be an informed citizen and tell the folks at the state, as we did during the SB 358 fight, that no, the Bitterroot is not lacking any water, and it shouldn't even be a problem. And so these elements of increased cost and time is just senseless. And number 4, if water rights are uncertain, insist on a water rights permit or alternate supply. You know, if you're close enough, consider municipal water. But I'm here to tell you, in the state of Montana, we're spread out. Our offices, our 9 offices, cover an area of approximately 62,000 square miles. The state itself is 147,000 square miles. How often are you going to have municipal water available? You still need to have water. Number 5, disclose water rights situations to buyers. That's for you sellers. If you represent a seller, be transparent about what it is and isn't, guaranteed in terms of, wells that have been drilled. If they were under the old exempt well rules, they may not hold up under current law. Or if you're a buyer, get written confirmation of water rights before purchase. And 6, work with an experienced local real estate professional and water law savvy experts. You need someone who knows Montana law, understands aquifers, and has been navigating these issues for years, not just your lot sale broker. Here's what's important. In closing on this, I want to give you why this matters and why you should act now. If you're thinking about buying or building a home in rural Montana, especially in areas like the Bitterroot Valley, this shift in water rights law and enforcement isn't just an academic debate. It's real, immediate, and a serious concern. Water is more than just a convenience here. It's the foundation of your home, your lifestyle, and your investment. And now, more than ever, you got to treat water access as a critical central issue. At Cyphers Family Real Estate, we believe in transparency, informed decision-making, and protecting your long-term interests. If you're looking at a lot in a rural subdivision or planning to build, let's talk. We'll walk you through the paperwork, understand water rights risks, and make the smartest choice for your future Montana home. If you found this video helpful, hit like, subscribe to the Montana Real Estate channel, ring that notification bell, hit that logo down in the lower right if you see it, and share with anyone you know who might benefit. And we'll keep tracking these developments and bring you the updates. Because in Montana, owning land is only half the story. You got to own the water too. Hey, well, the state owns the water, gives you the right. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.